gamers. Today we're going to be talking about the new patch, or the recent patch. Now the patch that I'm talking about is not the minor one that happened, but this big one where they did some civilization changes, and I feel like I played enough games. I was semi-active in the past 2 weeks, but I feel like I played enough games to kind of give my opinion on what the game is like right now, what's going to happen in the future, and just general thoughts on the patch. So the biggest one is obviously the siege, so we're going to leave that for the end. Let's get into like the Civ specific stuff first, and then we'll do other ones. So Abbasid didn't really receive changes as far as the changes themselves, like Civ ones, but there's some changes with Abbasid I'll talk about later. Byzantine got 5 wood oil nerf on the firearms, which is not that big. Nothing really changed there. Chinese grenadiers. I actually tried making some grenadiers with China and Jushi, and they just don't feel like they do a lot of damage. Now, I do want to say that Jushi grenadiers are good because they have like a debuff where the enemy takes more damage, but grenadiers, even with this change, don't really seem that good in my opinion. And then Nest of Bees, I'll mention it here because it mentions the rockets upgrade. The Nest of Bees is, like most siege, in a pretty bad spot. I've had game where I had like 50 spearmen and 12 Nest of Bees, and I just lost versus mass infantry and like some cavalry. Which in the previous patch, obviously the Nest of Bees army would win, but now the siege feels, in my opinion, pretty underwhelming. And the archer masses are dominating the game pretty hard. I haven't even used this. I haven't even played Daily on Water. Windguard Rangers are really good. They did nerf them a bit, but that's because of the Silco upgrade. They're still very good. French and JD on Water feel a lot better. I don't know if they're going to be viable in tournaments, but they do feel a lot better. Having the +10 pop once you make a dock means you can get a fishing ship a lot faster. Now, HRE and OTD received pretty massive nerfs, I would say. So initially, I wasn't really sure how to feel about this one. I wasn't sure how it's gonna play out. But after playing both OTD and HRE, the nerfs are quite massive. And for HRE, it was well-deserved nerfs. For OTD, like OTD kind of got hit as well, but I feel like they didn't need any nerfs, at least at the high level. They needed like buffs, if anything. Chapel is still better, in my opinion. I have tried mine work, but having so much less economy is very noticeable. The Garrison Relic and Reinforced Defenses, Health Nerf, and Emplacement Discount Cost is all very noticeable. So basically, when you Garrison like Relic into a tower with HRE and OTD, they are a lot weaker than they used to be, because it's not like 1 damage less or like 5%. It's like from 50% to 25% armor, 35% damage to 25%. So that kind of playstyle with towers and emplacements got nerfed pretty hard. And the one thing that I would say is the most noticeable for HRE is the Chapel nerf. So I talked about this on my stream, but basically before you were able to fit like, there's a first layer that's like farms around the chapel, second layer, and you used to be able to fit the third layer of farms. You cannot do that anymore with the new chapel. The way the range works is 7.5 radius to 6.5, so it's quite a big nerf. It might not seem like a lot. It is quite a big nerf. It's like almost 30% of the radius. If you want to look at not being able to fit third row farms, which means that you have 14 to 16 farms less around the chapel affected by the inspiration, which is quite big. And another thing is, because the range of the chapel is smaller, you also get, less wood on the first chapel, and you might not be able to get the gold and the wood. So it is quite a big nerf, but like I said, this was probably deserved for HRE. And I do think it's noticeable. I think HRE is still a very good civ, but it is very noticeable. The only thing that I don't like is that these changes are basically copy-pasted onto OTD. This is done just to match the other civilization, so nothing there. Not not much there. This is nice because the elite army tactics does not give HP anymore, so elite Onabugeshos are actually pretty decent still. Now Malians, this is a big one. A lot of changes to Malian, namely the feudal landmark with the trade. I have tried it and the towers feel quite nice. So basically what's changed is if you go to Hard Trade Network, your outpost upgrades cost only gold, so no stone requirement, which is very convenient. That's the best way to describe it. And they do a little bit more damage, but they're very convenient to make, convenient to do. I don't really know if you're ever going to see Malian trade boom in pro level gameplay, but I think if you're playing at any other level, I think going for Malian trade is probably a lot better than what it used to be. And then obviously the next one is the Farimba Garrison. Oof, I have a lot of opinion on this, a lot of different opinions depending on the matchup, but this is kind of the TLDR. I believe that at the top level play, after trying Farimba a bunch, it is very noticeable the amount of food you're getting less because you're not doing the Fulani for the cows. There are some situations you do want to go Farimba, but if it's like a super passive game, I'm booming, my opponent's booming, I would probably go Fulani. If you're in a game where you've been fighting and then you're aging up and then you have like 40 javelin throwers and 30 donzos, going for Farimba and going Mansa Javelineer where all your javelin throwers are going to get upgraded to the Farimba version is very strong. So even though you're not going to have as much food income, it's very strong because they all get poisoned, right? So it's very, very good. I have played some with the, what are they called? Freeborns and Mansa Musafari. I actually think that Mansa Musafaris are quite good because they do have only more melee armor and health, but your Musafaris that you build in Feudal Age also get upgraded to those, so it's very good. Now, Mansa Freeborn, you actually have to make them kind of from zero, right? So if you're playing against like an archer civ and they have like 40 archers and then you pick Mansa Freeborn and they have high ranged armor, it's going to take you quite a while to build them up. And at that point, I feel like you might as well go Sofa, right? Because you can pre-make Sofas and they're also cavalry. So if you want like something to tank range units, I feel like going Sofa is probably better. So yeah, Farimba has its place. Initially, I thought this might be like every game you're just not going to go Farimba. I don't think that's the case because Fulani gives you a lot of tempo to play. But you can go both. Both are pretty decent. Especially with all the food nerfs. So the food upgrades receive nerfs. So you have even less food than you used to. So now if you go Farimba, you have even less food because you don't have Fulani landmark. Mongol, nothing there. Ottoman. Now, Ottoman received a lot of Vizier points, so I'm not going to go through every single one of them and my experience with them. Or I might. Okay, fuck it, I'll do it. This is very strong, number one. This is the one that enables you to build Janissaries and Knights, plus now it gives you 25% production speed. That one is very strong. It's a good buff, I think. Alright, this one, right here. That's very good. Extensive fortifications. Defensive buildings are 20% cheaper. So if you see you're going into some kind of long game or you want to throw down some keeps, this is very good because it reduces your keep cost, I think, to 720 stone. And if you're getting all in by, which is very interesting, if you're getting all in by Burger or something where there's a lot of armored units, actually going for this makes all your garrison arrow replaced with crossbow bolts, which deals +1 damage and +2 versus heavy units. So you can actually kill men-at-arms a lot easier, even if you're in feudal against castle. I'll talk about cavalry archers at the end. This is really good. I feel like the way you kind of want to play Ottoman right now is some kind of version of fast castle, get some relics, get some pressure, then throw down another TC or maybe 2, and then take the Pax Ottomana tier 3, where your villager production is just boosted on all your TCs for 50%, by 50% for 4 minutes, which is very strong. This is incredibly useless. I've seen a lot of people that were losing their mind because you can make a great bombard in feudal. You would need to fight in feudal for like 30 minutes or something to unlock this. So it's not very good. Even getting it in H3 because of all the siege nerfs, it is not very good. so don't get baited. So let's talk about cavalry archers. Cavalry archers are very good units, but they're units that come at a very wrong time, always. So this is basically the idea. If you get to cavalry archers in feudal, it's great. They're great. They're amazing. What is the problem? You need to fight so long in feudal to unlock cavalry archers that you will either be in castle or your opponent will be in castle, and at that point you probably want to age up too. If you rush castle and then you have a chance to unlock cavalry archers, well, you could make cavalry archers, or you could just make knights or janissaries. While cavalry archers are very good, I feel like they're just always arriving at the wrong time, no matter which playstyle you choose. I would love to use them, I just don't know when and how to use them, right? Janissaries received some changes. They're still very, very, very good against cavalry. They're the best anti-cavalry range unit in the game. Rus, not much. I'm going to talk about, I'll touch upon the wall changes now. So all walls have been nerfed, and I personally think this is a good change for specifically feudal age. It is very noticeable. So the wall build time is like from 3 to 8 for Rus, and I think others are 4 to 8 seconds. I think it's a good change. It basically delays people being able to wall around and allows you for more time to get in and do some damage. I think overall that's a good change. Don't mind it at all. Iobid just got some fixes. JD. Now I mentioned JD with the dock stuff. Now this I thought would be quite good, but it ended up being quite disappointing. And I don't think the problem is, Elite Riders got nerfed for some reason, and Jean's Riders got, Jean's Riders and Elite Riders got nerfed, which I don't really know why, but this ended up being a very big disappointment. I'll say why. I think the fact that now you can make Jean's champions in barracks and stables is great. But when I tried them, I was like, I tried 2 games, right? I tried melee ones and range ones. And I was like, what unit comp do I go to make this a thing? So, I didn't even know, but the melee champions cost 160 food and 40 gold. That's a lot. That's a lot, right? So, I was like, what unit comp do you want to go? So melee, the men-at-arms, Jean's champions, do bonus damage against spearmen, which is like, spearmen get countered by everything except like horsemen and knights. So you can counter spearmen with crossbows, you can counter spearmen with archers. It's like, do you really need an infantry melee unit to counter spearmen? And if that's the case, your army comp looks like something like horsemen or knights plus Jean melee infantry champions, so that they kill the spears. But then if the opponent just makes crossbows, right, then it's like your champions and your knights are now going to get dented in. And not to mention, it doesn't really work out because Jean's champions are 160 food, and then cavalry like horsemen or knights also cost a shitload of food. So the amount of food that you need to sustain that unit comp is crazy. Now, Elite Riders is very similar. They are horsemen, but they counter crossbows. But why would you go for them when you can also just make horsemen? Right? Like, they counter something that you already have multiple counters for. Like, if these were horses that have bonus damage versus, like, melee heavy units, then it's kind of like a interesting interaction or something. And I'm pretty sure they have better stats than horsemen, but they kind of overlap with what they're doing to what we already have in the game. So I didn't really find the ability to make them out of barracks or out of stables like revolutionary. I'm sure you're going to see games where people will make them, but I thought it would be better. But then when I actually tried, I was like, Jushi received a lot of buffs. Let's just quickly go through them. Grenadiers, you always want to be making Grenadiers as Jushi because they have an upgrade where enemy units take more damage. And they have a new upgrade that gives cavalry 20% attack speed, which is really, really strong. because it impacts your knights and it impacts your Imperial Guard in Imperial Age. So, not Delhi. Jushi got some really, really nice buffs. They also received this upgrade, which is but they did receive pretty good buffs, and one of the civs that should definitely be doing quite a lot better in the recent patches. And then OTD, I kind of mentioned it with HRE. Now let's talk about the big changes. So all these civs are changed in massive ways, and not because of the civ specific changes, but because of the siege changes. So I didn't know where the patch was gonna go before the patch came out, because it's one of those things where you need to play it. And I think the idea was that if you don't have Mangonel, or if you don't have Springles and Mangonels are weaker, then there's going to be a lot more unit interaction back and forth, and these siege fiestas are going to end, kind of thing. And that didn't really work out quite as well. And I think one of the reasons they did these changes is to reduce amount of long games and people camping with siege. But after now 2.5 weeks of the patch, I got the stats from AOE4 World. The games are now 1 minute longer on average, right? Which means that if average game time was 17 minutes, now it's 18 minutes. Which means that not only this did not reduce the game time that people were playing, but it actually increased it. It did the opposite. And this is what I said would happen, because Mangonels, while at time, or Springles or whatever siege, can feel oppressive and boring, I always said it's because of the maps we're playing. Like, you always knew, like, okay, on this map it's just like at some point it just reaches mass siege and it's obnoxious, and you know. But a good map, a good explanation for this is Dry Arabia. The map is so open, and the way it plays out, you rarely see like Mass Springle versus Mass Springle and Mangonels in the previous patch, so the games don't tend to go that way. So I always thought that big reason why you saw these battles at the high level play, at least, is because of that. What ended up happening with removing, I'll talk about Mangonel Springle interaction first. So Springles are in a really terrible spot right now. They are extremely useless. I had a game where I made like 15 Springles versus Spearman Archer with elephants. Springles are supposed to counter melee units, and I ended up losing with like Gold Wood Siege and elephants that caused gold and food to the most basic units, which are Spearman and Archer. Which, in my opinion, shouldn't happen, right? Gold units should be good. That's why they're gold units, right? So Sprinkles right now, they need either a buff or some kind of change because they're in a very bad spot. I actually really like that they nerfed Siege HP, and I think that just getting on top of Siege and just popping it kind of feels good. It feels that the Siege is, you know, more exposed. It's riskier to go Siege. And if they left the siege as it was and reduced the siege HP to what it is now, I think would have been great changes, because if you don't pay attention to your siege for like 2 seconds, you can lose like 10 Springles, 10 Mangonels immediately. So the siege HP nerf is a change that I really like. Now, the Mangonels. So Mangonels don't have a range counter anymore, because Springles are now like anti-melee infantry something, I don't know. So Mangonels are supposed to, the idea, you use Mangonels against range units and you use Springles against melee units. It's not really working out. So Mangonels like a few days ago, received like a minor buff through like a super small patch where they do more damage against range units, but they lost their ability to have like a homing missile aim, right? You have to, if the enemy is moving, you have to hit in advance, and they do a lot less damage overall, and it's quite noticeable. Now, the Mangonel nerfs in Castle I really like, okay? So I really like that when you're fighting, the opponent cannot just make a Mangonel and then you can't push anymore, okay? So that's not a thing anymore. You can just fucking run through their units and kill them. And I like that. What I don't like is how bad mangonels are in Imperial Age. There's an upgrade for mangonels in Imperial, but I think they're still too weak, and it's too hard to get damage in on the enemy units unless they super stack their units. And it feels like even when they super stack their units, you get a good shot. It's so easy to kill mangonels now that even after killing units, it doesn't feel worth it because you just lost something that's very expensive. So in Castle, I think Siege is better in the current state. I think Castle is now... So Castle used to be more like Imperial. Now Castle is more like Feudal Age, where you're still fighting with units, except you're adding Knights, Men-at-Arms, and Crossbows into the mix. And you can add, you know, Trebuchet or Mangonel, but they're not as impactful. And I like that. Now, in Imperial is where I find a lot of the problems with Siege and with this new patch. I think Imperial is completely messed up. And also we had University upgrades, by the way, which I forgot to mention, which I'll talk about. So right now, Feudal, thumbs up. Castle, thumbs up. And then one thing I don't like about Castle, let me just back it up a little bit. So there are some civs like Ayubid that heavily relied on aging up to Castle, doing some harassment with Camel Lancers, then making like 2 Mangonels and pushing. That is a lot harder to do these days, and that's something I don't like, that it's just gone. I think someone is at the door. Give me a second. Alright, so like I said, the Ayubid thing, the Ayubid pushes is something I dislike, that it's kind of gone. It's not as strong, and I feel like Ayubid, whenever I played against Ayubid in this patch, or when I tried to play Ayubid, you don't really do that anymore, which I'm not up for, like removing styles from Civilizations. Another thing is, China, for example, had a playstyle where you go 2TC, you age up, and then you go Spearman Crossbow into Nest of Bees. That style is also pretty dead, because Nest of Bees do not justify their cost if you're making them, so you're just better off of making mass units instead. But, like I said, I also am all up for, you know, having where a Mangonel doesn't just shut down a whole push. So it's kind of like a mixed bag in Castle. Now, Imperial where I really dislike the game, so I'll try to name the reasons for it. There is no death army right now, and that's a big problem. Having death armies is a problem, but having no way to end the game once you have a big lead, or needing a very long time to end the game once you have a really big lead, is also a problem. So you kind of want to be somewhere in between. You don't want to reach a point where someone makes a death army and there's nothing you can do, but you also don't want to reach a point where one guy's mining gold and trading and you're not, and you're just killing his army with archers and spearmen, right? There's some kind of middle ground there. So right now, or in the previous patch, if you would get a lead, you can make a siege ball. I'll just give you an example. I'm not saying it was great gameplay, but I'm giving you an example of how it worked. You have a lead, you make 2 Mangonels, you make 5 Springles because the opponent has 2, and you push, and the opponent cannot do much about it. You had a lead, and the only way for the opponent to come back is making more Springles, not be your siege, standing around the keep, and so on and so forth. That is kind of gone, and you're supposed to just win with massing units and running through your opponent. Now, because there's no Mangonels, there's no Springles, the actual comeback potential is very much gone. So, before, if you make a keep, so I'm going to just show you right here. I'm going to open my paint. Watch out, flashbang. If, let's say you're on the left side, you have a keep here, and your army is like this, right, looking this way. The enemy is here, and they're sieging you down with whatever. They have like a trebuchet, and they're sieging you down. So one of the ways you can come back is you can do run-bys on this side, run-bys on this side, and with cavalry. And what you do is you make Springles to kill the trebuchets, so you can slow down your opponent and you can start to build some kind of comeback. Most of the games that I've had now is if your opponent is if your opponent is ahead, and when I say ahead, just has more units than you on the field right here, if he makes 2 trebuchets, you actually cannot come back from that situation. I think every game that I've had where I lost one fight in like castle or mid-castle age, the opponent can just treb you down. There's no Springle, so there's no counter, because the only way to kill trebuchets now is actually get on top of them, but you can't get on top of them unless your army is bigger. If your army is bigger, you're just going to kill his whole army. So it becomes a lot harder to come back into the game for these reasons. And if you're wondering, well, can't you still do run-bys? You can do run-bys, you can go around, and then your opponent is going to push in and kill you, right? So if you get behind, the comebacks, not really there. Now, that is for Castle. I'm talking about Castle Age, okay? Now, what happens in Imperial? In Imperial, because you both have so much eco, and the siege is not as strong, aka Mangonos, once you reach about 40 minutes into the game, what you usually have is like production buildings, and you're just rallying them forward. The opponent is rallying their shit forward, and there's no end to it. I think I have played more 1-hour games in the last 2 weeks than I have in the last 3 months. So, why is this? Because you don't have the death ball in Imperial Age, you don't have that strong push, the games are now going a lot longer. Now, why is this happening? This is not just the siege problem, this is also the multiple nerfs or changes to the university upgrade. So, for example, cavalry is good for raiding. Cavalry is not very good for main fights unless the opponent has a lot of range units. Infantry is good for straight up pushes and protecting your siege or protecting your range units from cavalry. And then range units are good usually with infantry to push through your opponent, right? But because Elite Army Tactics is nerfed, by all melee units lost 20% HP, melee infantry, the melee infantry plus range comps are a lot weaker. So if you're trying to end the game, before, if the opponent had horsemen, whatever, crossbows or archers or hand cannoneers, if you go spearmen and then archers or whatever, you can actually just push through that army, because the spearmen will trade very efficiently and you can kind of mow down. That's the whole point. Your melee infantry is immobile, but they're very strong, they're beefy. Right now, they're not beefy anymore, so that kind of went down the drain a little bit. And what you usually see is actually just cavalry archer versus cavalry archer, or cavalry versus, or with hand cannoneers or something like that. Hand cannoneers have received a nerf. Chemistry upgrade used to give them 20% more damage, now it doesn't. Now it gives them damage versus melee infantry, which people aren't really making. So in the current meta at the top level, and I'm pretty sure this is gonna be, other people will catch up over time, is it's actually better, in my opinion, to make crossbows or just straight up archers than to make hand cannoneers, because hand cannoneers are good against infantry, but the infantry is not made as much, so you might as well make crossbows that are cheaper, and they still do pretty they do overall good damage against everything. So I've had a game where opponent would be mining gold, had 5 relics, and I was making just archers and just spearmen, and he couldn't finish the game. So he was making like, I don't know, it was like knights, siege, I don't know if it was hand cannoneers or janissaries. I was making archers and spearmen, and we're just kind of fighting on the middle for about 30 minutes with nothing being moved. Nothing is really happening, because there's no that, you know, ball of units that's so strong that it can potentially end the game. And a lot of my games that did go 1 hour were exactly like that, where it's just like we're rallying into each other, nothing's really happening, and whenever someone tries to make siege, you can just right click it and the siege just dies. Another thing that was changed is cavalry got 10% extra HP, so it makes the whole cavalry playstyle even more incentivized to, you know, to just go for it. So with all those things combined, it makes the games a lot more dull. And initially, people were skipping siege completely, but in the past few days, what ended up happening is people reach a point where they start killing villagers and then just go for mass siege, which is weird because people used to play with like 130, 140 villagers, like make some siege, you're trading, you're fighting, yada yada. But now what happens is people gather all the resources, they suicide like more than half of the villagers, they make like 15 mangonels and a massive army, and it either works or it doesn't, and you leave the game because you've suicided your whole economy. But the interesting part is, you can't actually kill the mangonels because there is no range counter to mangonels. Because the cannon and bombard damage has also been reduced overall. Great bombard damage has been reduced, and Culverin is not really like anti-siege anymore. It's basically like a bombard with a bit more range. And one thing that I was not aware, but Great Bombard has more range than a Culverin now, which is very confusing. Because you have a Bombard, you have a Culverin that has more range than a Bombard, and then you have a Great Bombard that deals splash, but for some reason also has the most range out of those Bombard type siege units. I think there's a lot of things that devs completely overlooked. One of those things is right now, or before the patch, Siege had like their roles. Like this is Springles is anti-siege, Culverins are anti-siege. They're like more damage, but you know, Springles can kind of out micro them. Mangonels are Mangonels, Trebuchets are Trebuchets, Rams are Rams. In the current patch, you have Bombard, Culverin, Great Bombard, Cannon, Pow Pow, that are all doing the same thing, which is kill buildings. They just kill buildings. An even funnier thing is, the landmark from French and JD, which is not School of Cavalry, Royal Artillery, the one where it enables you to make Culverins and Ribaldequins. What you are unlocking is a Ribaldequin, which French doesn't have, College of Artillery, right? Which is great. And then you're unlocking Royal Cannon and Royal Culverin. But Royal Cannon and Royal Culverin are the same unit, right? They're not, it's the same thing. So that landmark just straight up needs a rework, because it makes no sense for that landmark to unlock a unit that's like, yeah, it's same like this one, basically. It doesn't do it. Like, that landmark just needs not a buff, it just needs a rework completely. So yeah, overall, I have found my games to be a lot longer, with a bunch of nothing happening on the middle of the map. Is the best way I can describe it. The archers are a lot stronger, because, you know, they receive the buffs in the silk bows where they have extra range, so you can kind of micro archers a lot more. And one of the most annoying things in the patch is the Castle Age. No matter what civ you play against, you can just go like 50 crossbows with some spearmen and you kill every army. They trade pretty well against archers, and if the enemy makes archers, you can just make men-at-arms. And if you go like 50 crossbows, you can kill knights, you can kill men-at-arms, you can kill the enemy crossbows, you can deal with siege because the mangonels don't do enough. And like I said, if the enemy makes horsemen, you can make a few spearmen and you're good to go. If the enemy makes archers, you can just make like 10 men-at-arms to be a front line, and then crossbows will kill everything else. So we're in a situation where if you don't know what your opponent is doing, making crossbows is the right choice. And before, you could do that, but then if the enemy has a mangonel, you're going to be in a pretty rough situation. Right now, is if you make crossbows, there's no really good counter to it, right? The best counter to it is if you overwhelm the opponent with horsemen, if they are like unaware that you're making horsemen or something like that. But even then, you can kite and trade somewhat efficiently if you get completely caught off guard. Another thing that happens in Imperial, from my experiences, the sieging that I mentioned earlier in Castle that happens with trebuchets. So earlier I mentioned like trebs from here in Castle just hitting you and you can't really do anything, right? What happens in Imperial is, let's say you have a keep here and you have a keep here and you have a keep here. a keep here. If the enemy has 2 bombards, they can come here. Their army is standing. This keep is dead. Right? There is no defending this keep. Again, the only way to defend this keep is to have more army than your opponent and kill the whole army. Before the patch, if you're behind, you can make a keep and you can buy yourself some time to get siege or to do some raiding or to do whatever, right? Now, I don't know if this is necessarily a good or a bad change. This is just how it is right now. So if you have a keep, the opponent can basically just mow them down one by one, and there's not much you can do about it. Like I said, maybe that's a good thing, but it feels weird when you're playing and the enemy has a keep on their own, right? They have 2 bombards, and you're like, yeah, there's nothing I can do there. So that keep is just gonna die. Which begs the question if people are even going to be making forward keeps, or not even forward, but in front of your base, or you're just going to make a keep here so that you can farm around it, because then the opponent would need to cross the whole map. So the whole side of like positional keeps, I feel like they're a lot weaker, because trebuchets and bombards, you don't have a range counter, so you actually have to go in melee to kill them. And like I said, if you were able to do that, you wouldn't be sitting in your base, you would be aggressive across the map. You have a lot of pushes in castle and early imp that's like, if you do fall behind, you're probably just dead, which I personally dislike. I like RTS games that you can come back, right? You can do something about it, you can out micro them, but then late Imperial is just rallying units into each other with no death armies. So overall, you can say that the patch is in the right direction, and I don't know where the patch is gonna like lead, right? I don't know what devs have planned. I can see this turning out to be a good patch in the end. I just think the road is very long ahead of us. I think there's a lot of interactions right now in the game that are very bad, and that they're gonna take a while to fix. So because all these changes are so massive, a lot of the matchups and the balance of the matchups have completely like flipped. So now it's a question, do you buff a Civ or do you buff Siege, right? Because all these changes we're getting right now are directly influenced by all the Siege changes. So it's like, are you going to slowly revert to Siege changes? Are you going to start buffing Civs and just double down on the Siege? I'm not sure. So I can see this patch being an overall good thing in like 3-6 months, a year. Or if the game remains this way and the devs are satisfied with this, then this is the version of AOE4 that we'll be playing, which to me is very similar to Age of Empires 2. I'm not a pro at Age of Empires 2. I haven't played AOE 2 God knows how long, but my experience on AOE 2 was you go horses or you go crossbows, and we're very similar to that right now. Yeah, in AOE 2 as well, if you start trapping a keep, you actually need to run under it to kill the trebuchet. There's no other way. So I feel like a lot of these changes are just slowly becoming AOE 2, which again, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Depending where the devs end up going, where the game ends up being, we'll have to wait and see. What I'm worried about is how long it's gonna take to get to that point where the game is like fine and balanced, or whatever you want to call them, or whatever you want to call the game at that point. And I am assuming, don't have any knowledge, I'm assuming that the next Civilizations or the next DLC is going to be coming out in like March, April, May, which I do not think is enough time to fix this to like a good state of the game that we've had beforehand. Now, when I say good state of the game, I don't mean necessarily previous state of the game was better than this one. It was balanced, like everything made sense. Now we made some drastic changes, and I don't know if 5-6 months are going to be enough to make everything good again, right? So that's kind of it. I talked about this on the Twitch chat earlier, but right now my motivation for the game is probably all-time low in AOE4. I was always super optimistic about patches, and whatever they did, I was like, all right, it is what it is. But the games that I've had, personally, were very boring games. Like, I genuinely feel like I'm playing the same game over and over, which is go cavalry, harass, okay, make crossbows, and we're in Imperial and I can't finish the game. So, yeah. I know this is my personal experience. Obviously, some people are loving the changes, and that's great. I'm happy for them. For me, this is, yeah, it is not enjoyable at all, and I hope something is changed soon. I don't know what, but I hope the game does not get to be this, because if the game is this, then I don't know if I want to play it. There's a game like this already. It's AOE2, and if I wanted to play that, I would play that. So we'll see. We will see. I've been kind of. I'm gonna go back to making guides. We've had some friends over, which I talked about on my Twitch. We've had some friends over, so I wasn't playing as much, but I'm gonna go back to creating guides and stuff. But like the motivation to play the game is literally all-time low, where it's not about balance, it's not about oh, this civ is OP, I don't want to play it. It's just I'm not having fun, and that's kind of it. Because people are always like, don't worry, it's gonna get balanced or something like that. I genuinely play all civs, so it's like if one civ is broken and others are not, you know, it's fine. I play all of them. It's just the general enjoyment of the game, for me at least, has gone down severely. And I hope it improves, because obviously I'm doing this for a living, and if I have to come every day, and it's gonna be a lot harder to create content, because streaming and creating content is like, if I'm balding and not in the good mood all the time, then the content is not great, people are having less fun and so on. So I kind of hope something is done just so that game becomes more AOE4 again, but we will see. We will see. But that's kind of it. Overall, I am giving this patch a thumbs down. Some of the ideas are good. I would say the execution is very bad. I think what they should have done is implemented these changes slower. Like, as in, we should have done, like, in my opinion, right? They should have done the university changes first and let us play for a month or two, and then adjust the siege based off of that. I think doing the university stuff and siege at the same time at this scale is what the problem was, because too many changes happen at the same time. So, yeah. That's it. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. The rest of the how to play civs like a pro should be coming. That's it. Maybe we'll do some more guides for like Malin or something, or Ottoman. We'll see. Stay tuned, and we'll be doing more Euro FFAs as well. If you're watching on YouTube, thanks for watching. If you're watching on Twitch, keep going.